The main theme, I think, is we're seeing all on the battlefront, lots of Ukrainian activity pushing back against Russia, which is a stark contrast. For months we've been reporting about focused Russian activity. The one thing that Ukraine desperately needs to avoid is get into a war of attrition. It's a smaller force, and if it gets involved in that, it'll be a war that'll be very difficult for them to win. Surprise and deception have been the attributes that have prevailed. If we look more specifically at the Donbass area...
Which is where? Just point that out.
Yeah, just over to this side, over this side of the country. The priority for the Russians, they've not been very effective. There's a large area here that they haven't yet controlled, haven't yet taken. And despite some continued attacks, they're not making much headway. In fact, the Ukrainians are pushing back just as fast at the moment. The referendum that's being held there, inevitably, it's difficult to understand when they don't control all the region how you can do a referendum. And also, loads of the people have just fled the area. So it's going to be a bit of a sham, whatever happens. If we now look at Kherson, down to the southwest region down there, here, very different strategy. Ukraine is tightening the noose around the soldiers in Kherson. They're being isolated. You've got Ukrainian attacks, if we look on the western side of the city, and also the Dnieper River acts as a barricade to the eastern side. So the Russians are gradually getting squeezed. Another area where they're trying to do a referendum at the moment, but of course the local population there has been very hostile to the Russian presence, and it's very difficult to see that you'll get any form of meaningful result out of there at all.
Yeah, OK. So aside from the referendum, which, of course, is a 4-day voting procedure, we'll find out early next week what's happening there. We also know about this partial mobilisation of, 300,000 Russian men, of course, across Russia. So what's your take on it, Sean, in terms of this mobilisation?
Yeah, it's 300,000. It's bigger than the standing army of 280,000 that Russia's would already had, and it's definitely not going to plan. If you look at, there's all sorts of demonstrations in Russia. Allegedly, about 1,000 people have been arrested already, but more.
Huge number.
Yeah, it's a huge number. But also strategically, if you look at the Russian border with Georgia, there's apparently an 18-mile tailback of cars as fighting-age men are trying to flee. Likewise, in Finland, Finland are trying to control the exodus of people out there. And also, the flights out of Russia are all absolutely crammed full, and flight tickets are going for ridiculous sums of money as well. The challenge, of course, is that Russia will be able to generate 300,000 bodies. The challenge is that quantity doesn't mean quality. And those bodies will not be trained, they'll not be experienced, and they'll not have the right morale. And the battlefield is a really dangerous place to be able to learn your trade. Interestingly as well, the Russian logistics general has just been fired as well. And I think that's just another symptom of a bigger malaise of corruption within both the Russian military and the political system. But returning to the point about Putin, is Putin's position under threat? I don't think the international community inevitably is concerned about mobilisation is escalating. But actually, Putin almost certainly wouldn't have wanted to mobilise. It does create some really difficult questions for his domestic audience. Questions like, if this is a special military operation, and if it's going according to plan, which is what he's told his domestic audience, why do we need to do the biggest mobilisation we've done since the Second World War? Likewise, if we are liberating people in Ukraine, why are so many dead bodies coming back? Why are tens of thousands of casualties? Now, there's no suggestion that Putin's position is untenable, but the pressure is ramping up, and history suggests that autocratic leaders rarely enjoy a long and happy retirement.